Ashe greetings, grand rising and grand day, and peace and goodwill to you all once again, my fellow natural native earthly humans. Yes, you, the earth's organic humans. Yes, you, humans with soul, my fellow soulful humans the world over. Yes, you don't know that this is yours truly, I, the mystic philosopher. And many thanks for stopping by and for giving up your time to listen. Now, today, I would like to quickly share with you some of my perspectives and my critical analysis on what I, the mystic philosopher, perceive to be 5 very foolish African leaders and their visit to the White House in what was falsely or erroneously called a summit with the US President Donald J. Trump. And I shall explain why I say that it was falsely or erroneously called a summit shortly. Stay tuned. And I will preamble my comments and perspectives with a quote from my late mother. And may her soul continue to find rest and peace with our source and with our most honorable ancestors. Yes, my late mother, a woman who was barely literate, a woman who had to leave school in 3rd grade to take on the responsibility of life in order just to survive. Therefore, according to the system, she was just a simple, unschooled, and uneducated, unsophisticated woman. A peasant, if you will. But fortunate for yours truly, I, the mystic philosopher. Fortunate for my siblings and the rest of my family and those that had the opportunity and good fortune to have met her, knew her, to have known her, to counseled and communicated with her, and to have learned from her. She was the wisest woman that I have ever known. She was a woman of profound wisdom. She was a woman of deep knowledge, understanding, overstanding, and wisdom. A knowledge, understanding, and overstanding, and wisdom that she had attained through her high school called the School of Hard Knocks and her graduation from the University of Life. And thus, when she spoke her truths, her words, though few, were authoritatively enlightening, but still not threatening or insulting. My mama used to say, and I quote, "You can't expect anything better from a hug, but a grunt." Unquote. Very profound. And I now qualify, I, the mystic philosopher, now qualify and add to her saying, her statement, by saying, if you are wise, you should not and you will not expect anything better from a hug but a grunt. Unquote. I will hereby take the liberty and assume that you all, my listeners, know what a hug is. And for those of you who might have forgotten, let me remind you that a hog, according to one online dictionary, is, and I quote, a domesticated pig, especially one over 120 pounds, which is 54 kilograms, and reared, one that is reared for slaughter. And so, if we are wise, we should not and we will not expect a hog, a pig, or a swine, if you will, to be like or to behave like and to manifest the nature and characteristics of another animal species, such as a bird. Another species such as a sheep, a goat, a cow, a dog, a cat, you name it or you name them. Let alone expect, if you're wise, let alone expect it, the hog, to behave like and manifest the nature and characteristics of a natural, native, earthly human. of an earthly organic humans. No, you wouldn't expect that if at all you're wise. And how do we know, or how can we know, and know that we know the difference between a hog and all the other animals, animal species mentioned earlier? Some of you may be asking that question. And the answer is that it is by their fruits. AKA, it is by their manifestation, it is by their behavior, it's by how they conduct themselves, it's by how they treat people. That is how we know. For example, in reality, pigs don't fly. You must have heard the saying, pigs can't fly, pigs don't fly. In reality. In your mind maybe, but in reality. Or pigs can't behave like birds. And the same analogy can be used to illustrate the fact that if we are wise, we would not go to the dwelling place of a hog. AKA a hog sty or a pig pen, as we, growing up in Jamaica, as we used to call it. In Jamaica back then, a pig sty or a hog sty. And expect to be received. Expect to be accommodated. Expect to be respected. And expect to be treated by the host, which of course is the hog, as a natural native earthly human, if you're wise. From my perspective, basic logic coupled with our activated common sense will affirm that such a scenario is in reality impossible. However, that is only for those among us that are indeed wise, but that does not apply to fools. Fools meaning simple, unused brain capacity, underdeveloped, sheep-minded people, aka ignoramuses, and sheep. In fact, a fool, because of who and what he or she is, will be eager, will be overly excited, and will be beyond optimistic anticipation to go visit. And again, my late mom used to also quote the age-old adage or the age-old proverb, which says, fools go and fools rush in where angels fear to tread. Unquote. Now, as some of you might be well aware of a recent so-called summit of 5 African leaders at the White House, and the controversy that came out of that meeting, and especially as it pertains to the president of Liberia. Now, let me quote, allow me to quote a few of the printed and multimedia news reported headlines. One is from what is called a HuffPost, and I quote, Trump's condescending remark to Liberia's president reminds us of one belittling phrase. Number 2, BBC, from the BBC website, and again I quote, why Trump invited 5 African leaders to the White House. And number 3 is from NPR, and I quote, Trump courts African at the White House. Now, let me explain why, from idealistic philosopher's perspective, why it was not a summit, and why I say that it was falsely or erroneously called a summit. A summit, this is not in my language, so I always have to keep going to the owners of the language dictionary. Well, according to their dictionary, a summit by meaning and definition, and according to one online English dictionary, is, and I quote, a meeting between heads of governments. Unquote. Now, from my perspective, the common denominator of a summit, or if you prefer, the common denominator of a meeting between heads of governments, is a thing called mutual respect. Respect. Meaning, there is absolutely no exhibition or demonstration of any form of superiority or inferiority complex prior to or during or after a summit. Therefore, if there is any evidence of such, or if at all it can be proven as such, then that disqualify the claim of such a meeting be called a summit. Now, let's look at some of the practical examples of the evidence that will further prove that it was not a summit but something else other than. And to do so, let me visit the HuffPost. And I quote again Trump's condescending remark to Liberia's president reminds us of one belittling phrase. The quote continues. Quote, I quote from the article now, President Trump has come under fire this week for commending Liberian President Joseph Boakai for speaking such good English. I'm sure he would say that about me. For speaking such good English. Remarks experts say we're utterly condescending and spoke volumes. Unquote. Let me just pause here and make a bit comment. Now let me give to Caesar what is due to Caesar. I give to Caesar what belongs to Caesar. The truth be told, I am not 100% sure that President Trump was or is guilty of premeditatingly, intentionally and maliciously being condescending to the Liberian president. I'm not 100% sure of that fact, But the outcome of what he said, his gestures, and how he said it, if or when analyzed critically, can only be honestly described as being condescending. Meaning, having or showing a feeling of condescending, meaning having or showing a feeling of patronizing superiority. And the reason why he was able to say it and do it was because he did not see the 5 foolish African presidents as his equal. This again proved that it was not a summit. Secondly, if it was indeed a summit, as I have defined earlier, you can look up the word for yourself. A summit, also known as a meeting between heads of governments, where the common denominator is a thing called respect or mutual respect, then instead of interpreting Trump's remarks of being insulting, of being condescending, of being belittling, disrespectful, etc., etc., then the Liberian president would wisely and immediately interject and interpret and correct and both interject and correct and educate him, the President Trump, and his ignoramus remarks, thereby reminding him that we are all equals here. Maybe not equal in terms of monetary and military power, but at the very least as humans, and equal in the diplomatic and official capacity of the individual peoples, nations, and countries that they represent. In other words, he would immediately remind him that we are not opponents, and neither are we competitors, but we are partners. Instead of absorbing his ignoramus remarks and then going away with bad feelings or feelings of being put down and go complaining outside the meetings to the news media. If the president of Liberia was at all wise, he would have hit the nail on the head when it was hot, right there and then. And if he did, he would come out looking and feeling great, both in himself and to the public. He would have taught President Trump and earned much more of his respect. Yes, he would have taught him something and earned much more of his respect. You would have to respect him. And above all, he would have made his people and us all Africans proud. I will even go further and take the liberty and say that this could not and this would not have happened to one of, and possible all the three true and great leaders in Africa today. And I speak of no other than the AES presidents, and the president in particular, the president of Burkina Faso, President Ibrahim Traoré. You joke, you mad? That could happen to him. I can almost guarantee you that no way you would ever find him at the White House stroking President Trump's ego, or begging, or hoping to gain gifts or favors. No way. And I quote from the HuffPost continue. During a Wednesday meeting at the White House, where Trump hosted 5 West African leaders, the US president appeared visibly surprised at one point as he marveled at the way Bokaya spoke, which is the president of Liberia. Trump smiled. I think that's sarcastic, but anyhow, Trump smiled at the Liberian president while he inquired about where he learned to speak so beautifully. Where were you educated? Where? Trump asked Bokaya, which is the Liberian president. Yes, sir, Bokaya responded. In Liberia, Trump asked. Yes, sir, Bokaya said. Well, that's very interesting, Trump responded. It's beautiful English, unquote. Now, from my perspective, from my mystic philosopher's perspective, in a summit, you don't address or respond to a partner as yes, sir, no, sir, etc. If you yourself are not addressed or being addressed and responded to as yes, sir, that to me personally is evidence of the president of Liberia's own inferiority and insecurity, etc. Another thing my wise late mom used to say is this: if you don't go under foul rules, foul can't S on you. Mean foul can't pour on you. To use the clean version. In other words, if these 5 foolish presidents did not go to the White House thinking, believing, begging, subjugating themselves and behaving as subordinates, behaving as inferiors and as suck-ups, you name it or you name them, then the president of the United States would not have had that opportunity to take liberty of them and to do whatever they felt was done to them, and in particularly the Liberian president. Now, I think I take up enough time. So I am the mystic philosopher. Ashe, Ashe, and Ashe I say. Full joy. Thanks for listening.